Today's experiment is what happens when you take the title of a public domain novel, fill it up with sub-Battlestar Galactica junk, and then dump a Jack Palance on top. I dare you to understand H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. And yes, that's the whole title. Flush them the movie!
This time we watch Season 13, Episode 10, H.G. Wells's The Shape of Things to Come.
What if the space program was brought to you by Prell?
But first, everyone, some follow-up.
I mean, the Prell bit it does come from the riffs, but what are you going to do? It's true. This is a movie of fantastic hair. Okay, follow up. Turkey Day 2024 happened.
It did.
Did you catch any of it?
I did catch some of it. It was, and you know, thanks to Pluto TV, I could watch it over and over again all weekend because it was just the Turkey Day marathon over and over again for 4 days straight. It was pretty cool.
They have not yet put out the compilation of just the host segments. If they do, by the time this episode drops, I'll put a link in the show notes. But I think that usually comes out a little bit later in December. So I'm excited to catch up on all the ones that I missed. But the ones that I saw were very neat and sweet. And it seemed like people were very excited at the movie selection and all that good stuff.
I got to see Felicia Day introduce Manos, which was really sweet.
That is good.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we got a few notes from our little bonus episode about some of the turkey days of years past.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, listener Rex on Blue Sky mentioned that the short that was going to be on the MST3K CD-ROM, the one which we don't have a copy of, What's It to You, Mylar, would later be riffed by the Mads.
Oh, of course. They just come around to all of the great things again. And they probably make it even funnier.
Since we don't have what the original riff was like, who can say?
We'll never know. Yes.
But yes, in their 11th night of shorts back in April 2023, they did in fact riff What's It to You, Mylar.
I totally have this vision of there being some, like, city thug. What's it to you? And Mylar's the answer? I just don't get it.
Well, you'll have to watch the short and the riffing of the short to find out more.
Yes, be threatened by Mylar, everyone. It's great.
The fact that the Mads had done it was totally a thing that I knew and had even put in my notes. But as eagle-eared listeners might have realized, I had a fever during the recording of that. I had a fever of 100 Fahrenheit and, still more than you should Celsius. And immediately after we got off the call, I went to my bed and fell down and grabbed a thermometer and was like, oh, that's what happened.
Oh, I thought there was something off. No, I knew. You said. So.
I was not.
I'm glad you survived the fever.
Yep. I'm really trying to make it out of 2024 in one piece.
2024 is trying to take you down, Chris, but so far you have been defeating 2024, and I'm rooting for you.
Yeah, and a thing that's cheering me up is that, as promised in a previous episode, I now have in my hot little hands a copy of the new Blu-ray collection Hardwood, the adult features of Ed Wood.
Oof, I'm not sure how I feel about this.
You don't want to watch these.
Yes, I'm pleased that I don't live in the same country as you and can be called over for watching Ed Wood porn, but meh.
Yeah. I mean, when I watch them, I've only had a chance to sort of look at them a little bit. When I properly watch them, I'm sure I'll report back. Perhaps even that'll be a Christmas present for everybody.
It's the Christmas present that keeps on giving, huh?
Yeah. But in the unlikely event that there are any that I think you will be interested in, I'll let you know. But okay. I don't expect that to be the case.
Fair.
So more on that later. It is definitely more hardcore than the stuff that I talked about last time. So there you go.
Oh, you mean it's not just a nutcracker of softcore? It's woohoo, the real thing.
It's real enough, let's say.
Real enough. That is what I expect from Ed Wood.
But we're not here to talk about the past. We're here to talk about the shape of things to come.
Oh, how pleasant for us.
This time we watched Season 13, Episode 10, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. So, this movie takes place in a science fiction future, which is a real shame because the plot would have probably made a little bit more sense if it didn't. But anyway, so yeah, there's recently been some robot wars, and they've really put a dent in humanity's interplanetary lifestyle. Most of the people who are left alive live on the moon in a domed city called New Washington. So, I don't know, I guess America's in charge. Like Ernie, I don't want to live on the moon, but Earth isn't doing much better. It's just soaking in radiation. And wouldn't you know it, there's only one place to get the medication needed to survive radiation exposure. A distant planet called Delta 3. Oh, what's this? Oh, okay. Apparently the people on the moon also need the anti-radiation medication from Delta 3. Well, what the heck? If you're going to take radiation medication, why not live on the Earth anyway? Whatever. Point of all this is, all of this medication, called Radic Q2, in case that's on the test, all of the Radic Q2 that humanity needs comes from the planet Delta 3. So naturally, whoever controls Delta 3 is going to have a lot of control over the rest of humanity. Seems obvious, but the leadership in New Washington really sleeps on this one, and they let a guy named Omus get control of Delta 3. Omus is played by Jack Palance, and so it's hard to root against him, especially when the moon-based government is so breathlessly incompetent. And you can tell they're incompetent because they run all their decisions through an AI named Lomax. Anyway, Omus also has the nickname the Robot Master because he's in control of a bunch of very retro-looking robots. And he's figured out how to convert them from mining robots who maybe are mining that medication. It's a little unclear. Anyway, he's turned them into battle droids. And also, he's figured out how to make a giant hologram of his head spin around in the sky above Delta 3. Omus is just like really competent, okay? Our so-called heroes, meanwhile, fumble and bumble around. They manage to capture one of Omus's robots and reprogram him, and they named this robot Sparks. Sparks can instantly teleport himself over long distances, which really cuts down the runtime of the movie. And our ragtag collection of bland scientists, pilots, and ineffectual senators do, this, that, and the other, whatever. Ultimately, it's Sparks who saves the day by hacking into Omus's robot army and neutralizing them. And then Omus's home base starts to collapse, and our so-called heroes escape Delta 3 just in time with a whole ship full of Radic Q2. Which, hopefully, will last them a good long while because then the whole planet explodes, taking away the one place that makes the chemical the rest of humanity needs to survive. Well, what leadership, what heroes, what a success. The end.
Meanwhile, on the simulator of love, while some tiny bonehead bots talk about the Kingachrome in the basement, Emily has been challenged by her simulator's bots to do their annual condiment taste test. In classic American style, Emily chooses ranch because we all just don't like too much flavor. The bots also choose their favorite of the condiments, but joke's on you, Emily. Bots don't have taste buds. We have fun. Condiments aside, Emily and the bots have made your boring drink coaster exciting for the invention exchange. It's a roller coaster. Huh? And it barely spills your drink at all while going through the loop-de-loop and the corkscrew. Kinga and Max have souped up the classic corncob holders to work with any food. Now you have no need for utensils or getting your hands dirty while eating. Why, these are big enough to hold a turkey just in time for Thanksgiving. Not the holiday, but the slasher film where these enormous corncob holders would be used to torture, released just 2 months later. But Kinga can't stand watching Max eat, so flush that movie. In the meanness zone of the simulator of laughs, we attend a comic roast of Sparks, the robot from the movie. I think Tom gives a secret compliment when he says Bobo the owl might be Sparks's parent. But Crow thinks he sucks more than a room full of Roombas. That's cold, dude. GPC comes on, but for her, this is a roast of Crow, and she is vicious. Emily, as Sparks' spouse, really brings the mood down when saying Sparks is actually about to die. Yeah, this mean roast now officially feels cruel, as all roasts eventually do. At the midpoint, we return to a simulator of true crime podcasts. Emily, with a bit of serial-esque intro music playing, welcomes us to a podcast that explores crime, violent crime, for your commuting pleasure. Tom and Crow, as other crime podcasters, make this one big spiraling conspiracy theory. What does intermission not want us to know? Emily has written a program to install love in the bots, but has to convince them of its worth. Her arguments? Love is a feeling that makes you feel good, but also makes you feel bad and makes you kind of stupid. Maybe even stupid enough to enjoy this movie. The bots are now totally on board. They want to be dumb enough to enjoy it, but Emily decides not to install love on the simulator of love. With the movie over, Crow has had a vision of a world takeover a la Jack Palance. It might have been inspiring or intimidating, but the impersonation has too many long pauses for effect. And in an exceptionally long one of these pauses, Emily and Tom quietly leave the room. What do you think, sirs?
Well, we're back to season 13. It's been a little while since we've done a season 13 episode, it feels like.
It has. I kind of missed Emily.
Yes, I mean, we only have so many Emily episodes, and we've got to carefully parcel them out.
It's true. Otherwise, I'll just get depressed.
It was certainly nice to be with Emily and Emily's team again, although I have to say, while I liked a lot of the episode and it was a good riff, this movie is just not my cuppa. It's just not what I want out of a bad movie.
No, I'm trying to imagine whose cuppa this is, you know?
I had a moment of thinking of some of the other sort of late 70s post-Star Wars, post-Battlestar Galactica knockoff movies, some of which have been done, you know. I went back and I watched a little bit of Star Crash. I decided not to go back and watch Cosmic Princess from Space 1999.
What?
But you know, watching Star Crash really sort of underlined the fact that that movie is at least fun to look at and weird.
Yeah.
This movie does have great hair, okay? Absolutely has great hair.
You cannot take away the hair from this movie. There's no way.
The hair is amazing.
Although I watched Space Mutiny during the Turkey Day Marathon, and there's good hair in that one too.
Yeah, but it's not the shiny, happy coat that you get to see on the everybody in this, basically.
But that's okay, because they wear shiny, happy coats made out of very shiny material, so it all makes up for it.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of visual appeal. Although, one of the things that I did enjoy was early on, I think it's maybe even the first shot of the film, you get to see a conversation with the senator of New Washington, and you know, you're looking out his window and you see a geodesic dome and a lake off in the distance because, of course, there's a lake on the moon. Of
yes,
course.
And Epcot's there too. I believe that's what the riff is referencing.
Yeah, but it, of course, is not Epcot.
What? But it looks so much like Florida. The moon is just like Florida.
It super doesn't look that much like Florida because it's Toronto, and Toronto is not very Florida. And that is Ontario Place, and that is the Cinesphere, is that sort of geodesic dome that's there. It is the world's first permanent IMAX movie theater, according to Wikipedia.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed.
I haven't seen an IMAX movie in it. I've been down to Ontario Place, but I have not actually gone inside that building. But yeah, this is CanCon, this movie.
This is CanCon. Well, yes.
It was filmed here in Toronto, parts of it. A lot of it was filmed in Montreal. It's CanCon.
It is, yeah. Well, okay, it can be CanCon. That's totally fine.
You can even hear somebody speak with a thick Ontario accent at one point.
Yeah, you can have this movie. This can totally be CanCon. I don't think the U.S. is going to want to claim this one. And I don't even think H.G. Wells wants to claim this one.
No, and frankly, of all the CanCon movies that they've done, I don't know, though, I could, Final Sacrifice, Zombie Nightmare, there are others. This is definitely not as good as those movies.
It's all right. Canada can produce some bad movies, too.
Oh, it sure can. It sure can. Okay, all right. I'm trying very hard not to cinema sins these bad movies.
Okay.
But our heroes, they steal a spaceship, they're going out to a distant planet, and they get waylaid and have to make an emergency stop at the Earth. Does this movie understand how close the Earth is to the moon compared with any other destination?
See, I don't think that I tracked that was supposed to be the Earth when I was watching the movie. It was just like some distant planet that was a part of these robot wars where there were like a bunch of kids living, and this distant planet was on the way to the other planet. But man, it makes less sense if it's the Earth.
They explicitly say it's the Earth at one point, at least, yeah. And then they encounter all these children who are, for no clear reason, dressed up like garbage bags or shaggy bushes or something. I know, it seems like there's some sort of a threat somewhere on the planet that we never see, like is never acknowledged. There's something's going on. A bunch of them have white hair, presumably because of the radiation. I don't know. They're living out in the wilderness on their own. They're the children who've been not abandoned. They've been left alone by parents who have been killed inside of the robot wars, and they're all afraid of sparks. So yeah, our Jason, our hero, says they must be survivors from the robot wars, which, like, yes, the robot wars that killed most of the Earth 7 years ago, and these kids who are a little bit older than 7, they must have, like, literally they must be survivors of the robot wars. Fine, but like, sure, why are the kids all that age? Like, they look like they are all coming from a single classroom. It is very bizarre. It is as if Anne of Green Gables just had them all in the classroom while the robot war was going on, and then when the robot war was done, they all left the classroom and nobody else was there on the Earth anymore. Of course, she was teaching 2-year-olds at the time, and then she promptly died of radiation poisoning, but somehow these kids have some resilience to it without the fabled medication. I don't know. This whole part of the movie was just ridiculous because they find a dead guy. They don't know what killed the dead guy. The dead guy is the friend of the person who's on the ship who didn't come out scouting with them. And then they meet the children, but they leave the children on the planet so that they can continue on to see Jack Palance. So now there's just a bunch of kids who were found and then abandoned again. This seems really like a bad choice for humanity. I don't know. I mean, I guess the chess-playing friend helped raise these kids and feed them and whatnot, but, like, otherwise, they went from toddlers to 9-year-olds on their own. What is going on? I do not know. If they just cut out all the science fiction and had everything happen in a small corner of post-apocalyptic Canada or America or whatever, this movie would make slightly more sense. Yeah. Except then you can't blow up the entire planet at the end of the movie to get rid of Jack Palance. Or Palance. I do appreciate that they do say Jack Palance throughout it, that somebody has checked Wikipedia and Wikipedia has finally settled that it is Jack Palance and not Jack Palance. And you don't have to choose wisely. Like you used to have to do on this show. I know. Wow. But I think it's still fun to say Palance. I think that is a way more fun way to pronounce his name. And just like Great Aunt Clark, I want to call him Jack Palance. But I also don't want to be haunted by Curly's ghost like City Slickers 2. So I might go to saying, now I don't know which one is right. Okay, listeners, I suspect that I edited out about 5 to 10 minutes of complaining about the plot of this movie.
Or did you?
But I do want to say, if you put that aside, like the riffing I thought was pretty good.
Absolutely, yes. They were lots of fun.
And I loved the sketches, in particular, the roast and the crime podcast sketches.
See, I didn't like the roast. Roasts are not my thing, though. Like, when you're talking about this movie not being your thing, even like a spoof of a roast is not my thing. I don't like them.
Yeah, well, I mean, neither do the people who made that sketch, obviously.
Quite obviously, yes.
But I enjoyed that. But no, what I really enjoyed about that was Emily's moment.
Oh,
Because, GPC showing up as like the person who drinks too much and says something inappropriate and gets in trouble at a roast, which is absolutely a thing that seems to happen. I don't know. I don't watch these things.
No.
But I hear tell that that's totally a thing.
Sure.
Fine. Make fun of that. But Emily getting up and then just radically changing the mood by saying that, Sparks has been diagnosed. He can't speak anymore, but he'd want to say thank you to you while he only has so many months to live. It's just like, And then when one of the bots says, oh, you really brought down the mood there. And Emily's just like, I want to show my rage. And good for her.
Absolutely.
For Emily, the actor playing Emily, the character. Yes. She's only going to get a couple episodes. She might as well show a bit of range. And she sure does in this sketch and in the podcast sketch.
It's true. Oh, I like the podcast sketch so much. I totally listen to Serial, not all true crime podcasts, but I totally listened to Serial when it came out. And I totally listened to season 2, which was called Town. And I couldn't do it after that. So.
It is a very popular genre. It is a very gendered genre, and sometimes it feels like a lot of the abuse that comes towards that genre is gendered, but also it is a genre that is fraught with ethical issues as well, as far as I understand. As somebody observing these very much from the distance, I have nothing more to say about that except what I've heard, but I still enjoyed it, and I enjoyed Tom and Crow showing up as like different types of bad podcasters, like the jokey one and the conspiracy one. Yeah.
Oh, and they just like amp each other up into conspiracy theories. I have to say, after listening to that podcast a little bit, I have fallen into listening to, instead of true crime podcasts, I am now listening to podcasts that like do an episode of Special Victims Unit for Law and Order instead, because it's sort of like the same thing, but it's fictional, or it's a fictionalized version, and they talk about some of the true crimes that it's based on. But that seems like a much safer way for me, at least, to go.
There's also a little tiny joke in that sketch which I really love, which I think it's when they come back from the intermission and Emily says something like, hi mom, welcome back to because mom is the only listener.
Oh, yes.
Such a good line. Such a good bit. So delightful, this team.
I love that the crunchy soy tea pulls their sponsorship. I love that.
And then she's got like a whole big mug full of like wafer crackers of the tea that she's crunching on. Oh, so good. So delightful. So in her introduction to this movie, which we probably played at the beginning of this episode, Kinga says offhandedly that the book, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come, is a public domain book, which it is not.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can't imagine that it is. It was published in 1933, which means it's after The Mouse.
It is after The Mouse's moving window. It was renewed in 1961 and therefore will not enter the public domain, at least in the U.S., until January 1st, 2029. I believe. I am not a lawyer, but the internet seems to agree with this.
Yeah, I still got myself a copy of it, though.
Oh, good. Oh, good. You're not strictly reading public domain books these days.
No, I mean, I try. No, but, as a Wells, I have been, inducted into the family, and I have had to read H.G. Wells. And of course, I have had to watch Orson Welles movies and listen to the Orson Welles broadcast of the War of the Worlds based on the H.G. Wells book. It's a thing that all Welleses must do.
And just to clarify, because many listeners don't know our last names.
Oh, I suppose that's true. Well, it's on the website, Chris.
It is on the website, but we just talk to each other by our first names and people just listen. So yes, your last name is Wells, like H.G. Wells, not like Orson Welles.
Yes, I don't have the extra E. I am W-E double hockey sticks S Wells, which I've decided that's the best way to spell my name from now on. I'm just going with it.
That is good. That is very
Really?
good.
I know.
All right, so you did the reading assignment this time. You actually brought out The Shape of Things to Come, which, from what I could tell from looking around, is a big book.
Yeah, and I have to say, in typical college fashion, I did not actually make it through all 500 plus pages of the book, so it's a lot. And a lot of it is like descriptions of war, and it's in like it's H.G. Wells writing, so it's really thick in parts because he is trying to make an argument for the way the world is going to change as it moves into the future.
Right. Now, I will say, we have looked at other movies that were based on H.G. Wells things. Village of the Giants is based on an H.G. Wells novel called Food of the Gods, which I think I read for when we did that episode. And Writing with Death is allegedly based on Invisible Man, which...
Didn't Beth read that for one of the episodes and talk about H.G. Wells?
Well, Beth has read it before. I've read it before. I don't remember who did the assignment that time. What I'll say is that neither of those movies had very much to do with the books that they were giving a tip of the hat to and saying that they were based on. So does at least this one reflect what the guy actually wrote?
I mean, it is like word for word, all 500 pages, Chris. No, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with it other than, actually, I don't even think it has anything to do with the book. There is a movie that H.G. Wells wrote that we're going to talk about later that has some names of characters that are used inside of this movie, but I don't think the book actually has any reflection in this.
I'm told
There's one name.
that there's a character named Cabal in the book.
Cabal is in the movie that H.G. Wells wrote as well. So they're carrying some names forward, but that's about it. So the book from H.G. Wells it has the best framing device, I think. I absolutely adore this. It's in a genre of science fiction called like future history.
Yes.
The device that they have is H.G. Wells is a character inside of the book. He's like a editor who's presenting somebody else's work. It's his good friend whose name is Dr. Philip Raven. He's a diplomat. He's a really important figure, and he has been having these really weird dream-like trances while he's been kind of in that in-between stage between being fully asleep and waking up, kind of in that weird in-between stage. He's having this vision of being a couple hundred years in the future, in the year 2106, and reading a history book. And then as he's starting to wake up, he grabs like a notepad or something like that, and he furiously writes down everything he can remember.
Oh.
And he's done this for a very long period of time, and he's finally gotten up the courage to share this with another person. And he chooses H.G. Wells because H.G. Wells is like so delightfully simple, he calls him.
What?
But he also has this idea of what's going to be happening in the future in the writings that he's done. So Dr. Raven has chosen H.G. Wells to share his writings with.
Sure. Okay, so wait, this is one of those, I heard this story from this person who told it all to me, kind of 19th century novel setups, although this is a 20th century novel.
Sort of.
But he's playing himself?
Yes, so H.G. Wells is just the editor who is retranscribing all these things but the thing is, he's not just reading the notes of Dr. Raven. He can't. When Dr. Raven wakes up, he writes everything down in a code that only he knows.
Of course.
Of course he does, right? And so what's been happening is they've been meeting over, again, several years, and Dr. Raven's been transcribing his notes with H.G. Wells so that H.G. Wells can write this extensive, or essentially reproduce this future history textbook.
Okay, I gotta know, how far in the future are we going, and what's the future like?
2106 is how far in the future we're going.
So he still could be true.
We'll get to that. But we're not even 200 years in the future. And you should know, Chris, within 200 years, we're going to be living in a utopia. That's right. A permanent utopia where there are no religions.
Oh.
There's no countries. It's like John Lennon wrote this song.
I know, Emperor John Lennon has won the day.
I didn't even think about it until I was saying these things. Yeah, they've like eradicated all nation states. They've eradicated all and eradicated is the wrong word to use. In some ways, these things have been taken out of society purposefully, but in other ways, they have just naturally fallen by the wayside as we are moving to a like single culture without class, without money as we understand it now, because money is one of the things that creates class and creates conflict, according to H.G. Wells and Dr. Raven's future history book, right? But we're moving towards this utopia where everyone is a middle class, intellectual, super thinker with mechanical abilities. They can build things, they can design things, they understand science. When people are young, they don't do like military service, they do mechanical service, like building machines and building cities. And then they get to leave that service as they're, as they get a little older, and they enter into like just being thinkers and beers, and everyone is happy. That's all everybody does. But there's no more war because there's no more nations.
And no more traffic accidents.
There's no more traffic accidents, although, I don't even know if there's cars. My cover for the H.G. Wells book would suggest that we all have flying cars and, the buildings that stretch up into the sky. But, I didn't get to the end of the book. Couldn't, 500 pages, but it is going to be moving towards a utopia. But there's lots of things that we have to do in order to get there. Between 1933, when this book is published, and 2106, again, not even 200 years, there's going to be a second devastating world war.
True.
That part came true. They're going to bomb cities to rubble, whole cities.
Yeah, that happened.
Yes. This world war is going to start in 1940.
Close.
And it's going to last decades.
Ooh, well, it depends on whether you count the Cold War.
But as this is going on, it's going to be all over Europe. It's going to be all over Asia. It's going to include the Americas. Like the entire war is going to be throughout the entire world. Like it's not just going to be isolated countries against each other. It just keeps expanding. And then at the end of the war, there's going to be an enormous plague.
Okay.
And this plague is going to wipe out a large portion of the population that remains after the devastating world war. And essentially, like there's lots of material, like around, because things have been bombed and it's just kind of lying on the ground, but there isn't a lot of organization in terms of countries or cities. But some of it starts to come back, and it starts to feel like feudalism, like small city states where there's, small time people who are in charge of just a small city and they're still warring against each other.
Well, we kind of see that in this movie.
And then what happens is a series of people who are mechanically minded and who are scientists gather together and they rebuild the transportation lines, the planes, the ships, and things like that. And they form a union, a worldwide union, and they start putting together in place a plan to move forward past these feudal states and into a single world culture. And part of what they're saying is keeping the world from doing that right now is just that nobody has a vision for what the world would look like afterwards.
I don't like where this is going.
Well, it's not going to happen through eugenics. It doesn't happen through killing populations or through Holocaust or something like that, because that's part of the feudalism, right? That's part of the having a state where there are enemies of the state. They have a vision of a world where there are no enemies because there's no separation. It's really interesting. Of course, in the end, we're all going to speak English.
Well, that's what I was curious about with this is it going to be, UK? Is it going to be America? Is it going to be Canada?
It's just going to be, Chris. You don't get it. There's no countries anymore. There's no separation.
Well, okay, but we're all speaking English. So
Well, that's 'cause
somebody won
yeah.
the culture wars. We didn't end up speaking Esperanto.
But it's not English as they speak in the UK or in Canada or in America. It is a basic English, I think he calls it.
Basic English is a thing that would have existed, I think, back then, yeah.
So it is something where you're taking down some of the cultural things that we're adding into our vernacular so that it is something that's, I'm going to say slightly more universal, but it's not, right? But if you think about, I am so boggled in my mind by this idea that this is going to be the progression of the world, mostly because, you're talking about a world where you've just had decades of world war. The population has been bombed to smithereens. Civilization has almost completely died. There's a plague, huge portions of the population that survived the war have now died in a plague. So how do you even unite this world? And that's the challenge that they talk about in the book, is all of the changes that they have to make this idea of a single world utopia.
Please tell me that the old movie, the movie that H.G. Wells had a bit of a say in from the 30s.
He wrote the script, is my understanding.
Please tell me that, that's the part that movie's about? Because that feels like the only bit that has any plot so far.
It's that whole thing. It starts in 1940 at the beginning of the World War, the Second World War, and it doesn't make it to full utopia.
Oh.
So this is one of the things that's really interesting and different about the book in 33 and the movie that was done in 1936. The book thinks we're going to be able to make it to a full utopia. The movie doesn't. It's a really interesting movie. It's not called The Shape of Things to Come. It's just called Things to Come, the movie from 1936. And it's, it very much mirrors his book, where you start with a world war and then you have a plague. And then there's a group of people who have some skills with science and mechanics who start to make the pathway to the future. And part of their pathway is putting down all the small feudal states that have come up. And then zing pow, we're in the future and science is great. And the future is very white and pristine, like the set of Logan's Run. And, science has prevailed. Everyone has plenty. They have everything they could possibly want. They live underground because they now can have sunshine underground. They don't have to build cities into the sky. And they've created a gun, like a huge gun that can launch rockets out into space. So science has reached the point in 2036. So, only 12 years from now, science will reach the point where they can shoot an enormous gun that sends a rocket out into space, and they can start colonizing the moon and other planets. But that's where everything breaks down.
it breaks down because Jack Palance comes in and he's like, I'm going to take over
Jack
Delta 3.
Palance.
Right.
I know. And there's also no you can only live until 30 as well. So it's not quite Logan's Run. But there's a guy who's like, like people are kind of grumbling about how great everything is and how that doesn't make them happy. And wasn't it better before science took over and made things cruddy for all of us? Science is terrible. And we just need to learn to do things instead.
Wait. Did Wells write that?
That is the character who is clearly supposed to be the villain. He is played by the actor who plays one of the chiefs or heads of the city-states who they have to defeat in the past. So they're using the same actors inside of the 30s, and then they use the same actors to play their descendants later on in the 70s.
Oh, that's always fun.
And then they use the same actors to play them in the future. So you have the same guy playing this vocal braggart who's like, I should be in charge of everything. I'm a natural leader. And he's the one who decides that he has to be anti-science and get everybody against him because otherwise he can't be the leader, right? Science is making everything too easy. So he has to villainize science.
I see. Okay, but he's a bad guy.
He is clearly supposed to be a bad guy. Yes, the movie informs us of that. And the guy, Cabal, is creating this gun that can send people into space. It's a really weird construction. But the people are like, you can't just send anybody on this experimental mission. It won't make sense unless you send somebody who's close to you. So he has to put his daughter and his daughter's boyfriend on the flight into space. So, of course, the villain guy is like, you're sacrificing your daughter to the god of science. Like, we will hate you forever. And they take their like metal bars and they hit the gun and they're trying to dismantle it. But, he just wants to keep science progressing. But there's this sense of people having ambition to turn things back into a feudal state again and not have it be a utopia where science is in charge.
Right. Well, I mean, in the movie that we watched for the MST3K episode, Cabal goes off into space in a spaceship with his son and his son's girlfriend, question mark? Wannabe girlfriend? Who cares?
Yeah.
It's not compelling either way.
She's the robot caretaker fixer person.
The robot definitely has the hots for her.
Oh, well, yeah, that's why she calls him Sparks.
Exactly.
But yeah, the movie from 1936 is definitely kind of got this edge at the end where you have conflict in a utopia.
Well, it feels like you have to have that for a big Hollywood movie. Right? Like, you can have an experimental movie, whatever. But like a big Hollywood movie is like, where's the drama? Where's the big climactic ending going to come from? There's got to be somebody who disagrees with the utopia for it to work.
It's true. And of course, you just shot two people into space. That is pretty dramatic. And there's like a big old monologue at the end as well, with the guy who's designed the gun just being like, oh, like this is going to be great and humanity has to keep struggling and there's no end to the work that we have to do. And, we have to keep finding good things to do. And, we're going to conquer this planet. We're going to go out to the stars. Like there's whole worlds out there for us to inhabit. And yeah, it's very, very dramatic.
Is it a good movie? I'm sure it's better than this movie, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come.
100% it's better than this movie. And if you're a fan of movies from the 30s, like that kind of pacing that they had back then, I think you would enjoy this movie. It's beautiful. Even the scenes that take place during the Second Great World War, just they're really nicely done. They're beautiful to look at. I mean, it's one of those things where a lot of the frames feel like paintings, right? And they feel like the kinds of paintings that you would see that artists were creating in the 30s with some Art Deco themes going on as well. It's really lovely. The story paces a little weird, but I think that that's mainly because of the time that it's being made, not because of the quality of the story.
So in the book or in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
is there any notion of like AI like we have in the 1979 movie? Like, do we ever get the robot who you have to run every single governmental decision by before you do anything?
No, we absolutely don't have that. Like H.G. Wells's world of the future is still a world of people, right? There are machines and men have built them and men drive them. There aren't robots. Like robots didn't build the big gun. People did, right? Robots didn't build all of their helicopters, which, by the way, helicopter like 6 years before it was officially made in the movie. Go H.G. Wells. But no, everything that's mechanical is run by men and built by men. There isn't that understanding of computers or that understanding of artificial intelligence at all. So no Lomax. No robots. No robot wars.
Wow. Okay, so we don't even know then whether the robots in H.G. Wells' imagination would have been able to taste condiments or not.
How could we know? H.G. Wells probably didn't think about condiments either.
No condiments came up, or were the tastes of condiments to come?
Oh my gosh. I can't even remember seeing food inside of these movies. What a hellscape.
What's the point of 500 pages of book without a single recipe in it?
I know. Martha would not approve.
Well, I grew very frustrated by the way AI was treated. I guess it hit a little too close to home these days in this movie. But I was also fascinated by the idea of a condiment day and the bots trying to fool one over on Emily with the condiment tasting day. And I know you love a condiment.
I do love a good condiment.
What would you say is your favorite condiment?
How can I name just one? Mustard is probably my favorite condiment, but I do have a spicy peanut sauce that's bottled here in Portland from our local wing place, which is fabulous.
You can't just say mustard. There's so many kinds of mustard.
Well, see, that's the thing. In my refrigerator, I have, just like American French's mustard, which that's a funny thing to say. And then I have stone ground mustard, and I have Dijon mustard, and I have spicy hot mustard. So there's lots of different mustards that are inside of my fridge, and I love them all. I cannot choose amongst my mustard children. I love them all.
Okay. Well, they are all good. The peanut one sounds awesome. I also have several different types of mustard because, they're all good is the thing.
It's so good. What's your favorite condiment, Chris?
It's a hard question, and I feel like it changes from time to time. I go through little phases of being really into one condiment or really into another condiment. And so I have to look elsewhere for guidance. So join me, won't you, for a little segment of Issues with AI.
It's time to have some issues with AI.
Condiments edition. And also, can you be fooled by a robot who's pretending it can taste edition?
Ooh.
I have asked ChatGPT to tell me 3 of its favorite condiments
What?
and to give me some tasting notes for them.
Is my job to guess the condiment?
Your job is to guess which one it's getting wrong.
Oh.
I asked it specifically, you're a sneaky robot. You can't actually taste, and you're going to get one of these wrong, but make it tricky, because I'm going to trick someone with these.
Okay, so it's going to describe 3 condiments, and one of them is going to be an incorrect description of the condiment.
There will be something wrong about it, and your job is to figure out which one is wrong.
And they're all going to be condiments I know.
Well, they're all real condiments. Whether you know them or not depends upon how much of a condiment connoisseur you are.
Bring on the banana sauce, Chris.
All right, first one, yuzu kosho. This is a Japanese citrus chili paste. The tasty notes include a sharp zing of yuzu citrus, followed by a spicy, salty kick that lingers. Surprisingly excellent when mixed into vanilla ice cream for a unique hot and cold dessert.
Okay, well, if that's not real, I want it to be.
Yuzu kosho is a thing. All of these are going to be real condiments.
Okay, all right. Real condiment, whether that's the actual condiment or not. Okay.
Okay, the next one, black garlic molasses. This is a fermented garlic syrup. Tasting notes, dark, sweet, and deeply umami with a syrupy richness akin to balsamic vinegar. ideal for stirring into hot tea for an earthy, energizing pick-me-up.
Hit me with number 3.
All right, number 3 is Ivar, a Balkan roasted red pepper and eggplant spread. The tasty notes, smoky and slightly tangy, with a rich velvety texture that clings to your tongue. It pairs shockingly well with pancakes, lending a savory counterpoint to their fluffiness.
Okay, so I've lived with you when we've had that third one inside of the house.
Yeah, we have. I have definitely gone through Ivar phases.
I don't remember having it on pancakes, though. I remember having it more on crackers.
Yeah, I also have never heard of the idea of putting it on pancakes, but you know, what are pancakes if not large, fluffy crackers?
It's really just, yeah.
They're soft also, I guess.
They're not large crackers. They're more like small cakes.
They're slabs of carbohydrates, that's my point.
That is true. They are slabs of carbohydrates. And sure, it's entirely possible that people in the Baltic put their Ivar on the pancakes.
Ivar, I learned as I was looking this up, is etymologically related to caviar.
Oh.
I don't fully understand how or why, but one spread is as good as another.
I suppose, but you don't eat caviar. That's animal product.
This is like a vegetarian caviar.
It's just not, though. The whole fish egg thing is just mostly giving me salt, right? And there's just something different about that whole the pepper spread.
Now, have you had either of the other ones? You've had Ivar before. Have you had yuzu kosho?
No, nor have I had the black garlic molasses. Have not had that one.
Have you had any black garlic before?
No.
Oh, I found out about black garlic many years ago because it was featured prominently on an episode of Bob's Burgers.
Oh my gosh.
Becomes completely addicted to the stuff. And then I went and tried it, and I very much understand why it is indeed very tasty. But I didn't know until now that some people make it into a molasses.
Yeah, that seems like a real weird choice.
And I've definitely had yuzu before as a fruit in things, but not in this citrus chili paste.
Yep. So, yeah, ooh. Well, I don't think it's the Ivar from the Baltics. I think that all tracks. I mean, the pancake thing is a little sus for me, but like, all right, I can go with that just being some sort of a carby deliciousness. So I have to go to the 2 condiments that I don't really know very much about because they aren't ones that I'm familiar with. I just, I don't see putting black garlic molasses in tea. That sounded the most unfriendly to me. I mean, it might just be my ridiculous Western and uncultured sensibilities, but I'm going with the middle one because I don't see putting that in tea for an earthy tone. That's just weird.
All right. But you are down with mixing the citrus chili paste into vanilla ice cream for a unique hot and cold dessert.
Yeah, totally. I'm down with that. That sounds good. I don't eat ice cream, so sure, why not?
I will say I've never had that sort of thing on it, but I have put hot sauces of various kinds onto vanilla ice cream, and it is wonderful for a unique hot and cold dessert. And that is actually a really good combo. And indeed, the wrong one is black garlic molasses, which doesn't belong in tea, says ChatGPT. Its intensity would overpower the drink.
Tea is so much more subtle.
But I hope it's just sneaky enough to fool someone who hasn't tried it before.
Well, I don't know. Do we want our AI to be so good it can fool Americans with condiments?
You are indeed too much of an expert on condiments to be fooled that easily. Charlotte, thank you for doing the heavy lifting on today's episode and reading a whole big book, or at least the most of one, and which counts, which totally counts. We've all been there. And thank you for watching that other movie and just thinking a lot about the various shapes of various things which are to come. But did you have a final factoid to share with us before we head off into the future?
Potentially. It kind of depends on if you guys have talked about the Horror Host Hall of Fame on this show before.
If we have, I don't remember, which definitely doesn't mean we haven't. But what is it? What are you talking about, and what does it have to do with this episode?
So, One of our listeners on our Discord mentioned that The Shape of Things to Come and a lot of the episodes from season 13 are now available on Amazon Prime. So that's where I watched it. And when you watch Amazon Prime, one of the things that it does is it allows you to read some trivia about the episode. And the trivia that Amazon has about this episode says that in 2015, Josh and Joel were inducted into the official Horror Host Hall of Fame, and that in 2021, Bill Corbett and Kevin Murphy were inducted into the Horror Host Hall of Fame. And I had no idea this even existed.
Neither did I. What even are we talking about?
Okay, so the Horror Host Hall of Fame, it was founded by a couple of people and sponsored by Ripley's Believe It or Not. It happens at the Horror Host Convention during Horror Hound, which is a horror movie magazine weekend, and they induct people into the Horror Host Hall of Fame. Horror hosts being people who host either TV shows or radio shows or internet shows talking about horror movies, introducing horror movies in some cases, watching along with the horror movies in some cases, or just presenting memorabilia that came up in a horror movie. And so some of these people have shows that were syndicated throughout the country. Some of them are super local to specific areas, but they're people who have a television show or an internet show, various varieties, which are talking about horror movies and introducing them to people. And this year, in 2024, Boris Karloff, who hosted a show called Thriller, has been inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website now that you've mentioned it. And indeed, 2015, Joel and Trace and Josh all got inducted. And then I see Crow and Tom being there as Bill Corbett and Kevin Murphy in 2021. And then after them in 2023, Rod Serling.
Can you believe it took that long for Rod Serling? Okay, but you've already scrolled through everything. Did you see the year that The Crypt Keeper got nominated and brought in?
Was it the first year? Like, you got it immediately.
No, can you believe it? It was 2014 that The Crypt Keeper came in. The same year as Grandpa Munster, but after Joe Bob Briggs. And you'll notice that Vampira of Ed Wood fame, 2011.
I cannot wait to tell you, if you didn't see it already in Nightmare of Ecstasy, the Vampira story that it connects to one of the hardcore porn films we'll be talking about soon.
Oh gosh. Chris, you're so mean.
It's a doozy of a story. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you have more condiments than friends, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we're on Blue Sky these days with the handle @itsjustashow.com, and we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you and like our randomly selected supporter, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. For about $1 an episode, you can be like Aaron, and you can help us research and record this show, and you can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits, and you can find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/165.
Well, Chris, we're moving into the future, and what does our future history textbook say that we're going to be watching next?
Apparently, we will be sticking with the modern MST3K and turning back to season 11, episode 13, The Christmas That Almost Wasn't.
I know I watched this one because I binged all of the Netflix seasons, but I don't remember it. Oh no!
Well, you've got a little time to watch it again, decide how you feel about it, see if you can remember anything about it, and get into the holiday mood. And maybe I'll reward you with some summaries of some pornography films.
Well, there's something to look forward to.
But until then...
I've had to truffle shuffle just to survive.
So how does Sparks play the keyboard with those weird arms? I mean, he's put out like 25 albums. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Okay, well, if that's not real, I want it to be. That sounds so good.